Let's talk about the best decks in Shadowverse Worlds Beyond right now. We had our first major tournament for the game with over 1,000 people competing. Let's go ahead and dive on into some of the data we have from this event and talk about some of the deck lists of the most popular archetypes that are finding success. To start, let's make sure everybody understands the structure of this tournament. It was rather unique, let's say. It was each player brings two decks, but the 10 rounds of gameplay that were played were best of one, meaning each player only had to play one of the two decks that they brought in each of their matches. This table here has a breakdown of the lineup pairings that were brought to the event, with no surprise, Midrange Sword plus Spell Boost Rune being the most dominating meta share percentage at almost 18% of the players bringing those two deck lists. That being said, to get a better picture of what's going on, I should say we would want to look at the individual representation of decks in the lineups that players brought, and we see something that's more in line with especially my anecdotal experience playing a ton of Shadowverse on the ladder, and that is Midrange Sword and Spell Boost are incredibly popular, each of these two archetypes being present in about half of the lineups that players brought to this event today. It's really kind of a strange format overall, because let's say you brought, mid-range sword plus something like Roach Forestcraft, you could realistically play mid-range sword for every single one of the games over the course of this event, and then there would still be, a Roach Forestcraft found success, even though we don't know how many times people actually elected to play that deck throughout the event. That asterisk aside, we can perhaps draw some conclusions about the loose strength of archetypes if we assume they all got played similar amounts. So here we have groupings of the starting player representation alongside the percentage of players that made the playoff rounds, i.e., went 8-2 or better inside of the matches played. We see Midrange Sword and Spell Boost Rune increasing their share from the group stage to the playoff stage by about 13% each. We see Roach Forestcraft have the biggest jump up, a nearly 70% increase from the group stage to the playoff stage. And then we see basically every other archetype until we get down to Face Dragon, which had a very small metagame share to begin with, falling off between the group and the playoff state. This means that if we operate under the assumption that players played both their decks a similar amount and they carried similar amounts of water for them, essentially the two most popular decks in the metagame, Midrange Sword and Spell Boost Rune, overperformed. Roach is kind of the dark horse of the tournament, performing by a significant over margin, and then everything else was varying degrees of struggling against likely the two most popular decks that they were playing into quite frequently. In my experience playing card games, the type of data that we are seeing here is typically one of the leading indicators that something's off balance or needs to be changed in the current metagame, and that is when the most popular decks in your tournament are also having some of the strongest performances, and these were the known best decks going into this event. It means that the card pool, generally speaking, lacks the tools for people who want to be beating these best decks consistently to be able to do so. The Roach Forestcraft overperformance, assuming those players were actually playing that deck a reasonable amount of the time, could be ascribed to the fact that that deck list really struggles into the mid-range sword matchup in particular, so you don't see a lot of it on the ladder environment where sword is quite popular. And in a tournament setting like this, if you're bringing the Roach Forestcraft deck, you can simply choose to play your other deck anytime your opponent has sword in their lineup. Next, I'd like to move into talking about some of the more popular variations of the decks registered in this event, kicking off with Sword Midrange. The variations I'm going to highlight in the video today are the ones that are the most common builds from the tournament and are also the most consistent in my experience from poring over all the deck lists from this event. In particular, when it comes to Sword Midrange, the things that I'm looking for that the most common builds we're sharing is copies of Amelia, Gildaria, and Amalia as 3Xs at their top end, while the bottom end being things like Samurai, Lance Trooper, and Princess's Picnic being very, very common, with Zirconia always being a 3 of at the 4-drop slot in the middle. The sword deck has a lot of its strength come from the fact that thanks to cards like Amelia and Boards in a Can with Gino and Amalia, this deck list can grind as the game goes long, but you also have some incredibly aggressive starts with Zirconia evolving early, and then something like Owlbear threatening a big burst at the top end of the curve, representing 12 points of damage in a single turn once you hit that 9 play point break point, so long as you have a super evolution available to you. The core of the Runecraft Spell Boost deck is the same as it was last season, with Ruler of Coyotes alongside a Dimensional Climb providing a 1-2 punch combo kill that can clear your opponent from full life with a good bit of variance once you make it to that point in the game. The big innovation with our latest expansion is the inclusion of this full Earthright sub package featuring Norman as one of our newer cards. Norman, when he fanfares or evolves, you get to either draw cards, gain 4 life, or make a 3/3 with Ward and Barrier. He allows this deck list to gain so much life in the aggressive matchups, go on the offensive with golems when that's what you want to be doing, and even keep churning through your deck drawing cards in mirror matches and when grinding is good. Between Sage Light Teachings and Norman, this deck really just has so much flexibility to gain life or impact the board, whichever is better for you in a given situation. It's also worth calling out that this deck list got new spell boost tools as well. Our Onion Fairy, the Burgent Rejected Artist here, creates a steady flow of 1/1s with Rush every single turn that only pick away at your opponent's board, but get that spell boost when they strike every turn, letting you take your dimensional climbs that you draw later and still supercharge them up to 0 energy to execute your combo kills with extreme consistency. The third most popular deck in our tournament this weekend and the most expensive to craft in terms of raw vials was Abyss Midrange. As is with everything, there's a lot of variation in these builds, but the things that I'm seeing most common are your 3 copies of Cerberus along with 3 copies of Argave. These 2 cards allow you to both interface with the board efficiently while also providing closing power when that's something that you're looking to do. As far as new cards from our latest expansion, copies of the Twin Calamities at the top end of your curve allow you to not only stabilize the board and your life total, but also go on the offensive when that's ideal, as well as Vula the Blastwing being a 2/4 with Storm that can come down early in the aggressive matchups and has Rush, not Storm, hit something early to clean out the board, but then her ability to give things that get super evolved extra points late is quite good alongside things like Olivia to allow you to push big damage when you're ready to kind of turn that quarter and start closing the game out. Karen, the Oars Woman, also very potent in this deck list. Her ability to generate a lot of wards for you on the board can give you staying power in the aggressive matchups, while her super evolution, allowing you to reanimate a 3 play point card every turn, allows you to bring back the Blastwing again and again for that extra closing power as the game goes long. Artifact Portalcraft was our 4th most popular archetype submitted in this event, but it was also the one that probably has the most variation among its successful deck list, making it to the elimination rounds. This sample deck list, for example, has 0 copies of Orcus in it, a just generally powerful Portalcraft card, but that's only true for about 20% of the deck lists playing in this tournament. About 30% of them had 2 copies of Orcus, and about 40-ish% had the full 3 still. This sample deck list is really clean and low to the ground, though, and I thought it was the best looking from among them from my experience playing with the archetype. For those who aren't familiar, the Embers of Darkness is really one of the big pickups from our latest expansion for this deck. Her evolution makes it so a selected artifact in your hand can't be destroyed by abilities, meaning when you artifact Catapult or Doomright Resurgence that artifact into play, it gets to live past the end of your opponent's next turn, meaning that it demands an answer. Flight of Icarus is also a stellar pickup. It means that the artifact you place its ability on gets a rush, meaning it can attack right away, impacting the board. And when it dies, you draw a card, allowing you to have a steady flow of cards throughout the course of the game to keep drawing into more and more gas. Abyss Aggro was the 5th most popular archetype registered in this tournament. It is definitely the premier beatdown deck in the metagame. Its ability to hit your opponent directly to the face with things like Rage of Serpents, while also having a variety of things that storm the field, like the Nocturne General and Ghosts from the Shadow Crypt Memorial, along with Odin at the top end, really give it a lot of power to punch through almost anything. If you're looking to win games really quickly, this deck list is one of the best ways to do that. I think making it one of the more efficient laddering decks in Shadowverse right now. Roach Forestcraft is simultaneously the most budget-friendly deck in today's roundup, but also probably the hardest to play. This deck list is essentially a combo control deck where you utilize things like Mage Journey Elf and Glade and Ambush from Above and Lily to kind of stabilize and stall the board, while you eventually build up into a big Godwood Staff Killer Rhine-Roach combo flourish, blasting your opponent from double digits to 0 typically in a single turn. Garden's Allure is probably the biggest pickup from our latest expansion for this deck, allowing you to fuse copies of cards in your hand, so that way you can kind of manage not overdrawing, so you can find your combo cards most consistently. Ambush from Above is also a solid pickup as well, as it's a 1 play point card that you can always play out, doesn't take up a slot on your board, and it deals 2 damage to 2 things with combo, allowing you to have a lot of defensive early plays against aggressive decks. Havencraft was one of the worst performing among the popular archetypes brought to this tournament, and it's easy to say that this was probably overhyped at the start of the season. I think a lot of the excitement and complaining around this archetype in particular was because people were too focused on how good its absolutely best draws felt to play against. The games where you curve Salfa into Wilbur, into Aether, into Janine, you absolutely run over most of your opponents. That being said, having that perfect 5, 6, 7, 8 on curve is something that's not going to happen all of the time, and the games where you don't have all of that come together definitely feel like they leave a little bit to be desired for this deck. One thing I will say that feels particularly innovative and a good shout out in this particular sample deck list from our more successful Ward players is 3 copies of the card Darkside. This is a flexible card that could allow you to put extra attack on something on your side of the board to punch a little bit harder as a surprise, but it can also target things on your opponent's side of the board, meaning it's a 2 play point spell that can allow you to kill something that has 1 or 2 points of life very cleanly in the early game, allowing you to survive longer against aggressive shells. The 8th most popular archetype registered for the tournament was Puppet Portalcraft, and again, there's a good bit of variation in how exactly the bottom and top ends of this archetype are configured. It struggled overall, but I definitely think looking at the wide range of different cards people are playing, there's a lot of optimization left to be had in this build. I will say one of the big upsides of playing puppets as opposed to, say, artifacts or other things you could be playing in the metagame is a stronger aggressive matchup. So the fact that things like Dragoncraft Aggro and even Abyss Aggro, while more popular, fell a little bit flat in this tournament, definitely hampered this archetype performance overall, I would say. The last deck list I wanted to mention from the tournament is the lone copy of the Dragoncraft Aggro deck that made the playoff rounds. There are some particular innovations in here that I hadn't seen in other lists floating around. In particular, this build is playing 4 copies of Fledgling Dragon Slayer as a way to interact with the opponent's board very directly without requiring an evolution. Other builds of this archetype I've seen played in the past tend to play the 4/5 Draconic that needs to evolve in order to clear something on the board. The big upside to Fledgling Dragon Slayer is you can take out a big thing on the opponent's side while prioritizing saving your evolutions to push damage to your opponent's face every single turn, which is definitely something an aggressive deck like this wants to prioritize doing as often as possible. All in all, there really wasn't anything too surprising inside of this tournament data after my anecdotal experience playing on the Shadowverse ranked ladder and in their smaller weekend tournaments. Spell Boost Rune as well as Sword Midrange are definitely the decks to beat, and from their performance data that we have in this, it seems like they're a little bit pushed and difficult to attack overall. Forestcraft being an overperformer is something that I don't think is too unexpected when you can explicitly dodge your Swordcraft matchup. It's definitely one I'm going to try and revisit and play a little bit more myself, but as I said, it can be a little bit more difficult in the ladder setting where you can't choose to dodge your Swordcraft opponents with it. I would like to give a shout out to Zhiff, who is a Shadowverse longtime community member, is my understanding, who formatted this unwieldy document that had over 1,000 players deck list registered inside of it. I'm going to go ahead and link their YouTube channel as well as Twitter account in the video description down below. If you want to go ahead and give them a follow, they're posting lots of data-driven and other good Shadowverse roundup data. If you enjoyed my summary of the first big tournament in Shadowverse Worlds Beyond, make sure you smash the like button on this video. And if you want to see deck lists being tried out and things being optimized and other roundups like this in the future, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of those. I'm going to be posting Shadowverse Worlds Beyond content and doing live streams here many days of the week, and I'd love to see it back again at some point in the future. As always, I appreciate everybody that made it all the way through to the end of the video, and I hope your next daily pack is an excellent one.